Hello, my name's Lee Mateer, and I am honored to present to you today my thesis research in my thesis titled The Impact of Social Media on Youth Sports Participation Among Students in Grades 6 through 12 at TCUSD number 3. This project, it reflects more than just mere academic work for me. It's a curiosity that I have. So it's personal and it's obviously very professional. One of the things I wanted to make sure I wanted to do during this thesis process is I wanted to analyze something that had the potential to better my own working environment in my you know community. And in the digital age, um, this is social media is definitely a topic worth exploring. So um, this topic intersects in my role as both an educator, a coach, a father, and a follower of Christ. And I wanted my research to help me better understand how the digital world, particularly this social media, um, you know, area. I wanted to learn how it's influencing the choices that students are making about being involved in organized sports. Obviously, I feel very strongly about organized sports, being a coach, and its power to help better people's lives. So, really wanted to take a dive into this. So, chapter one, the core question of my study was how does social media influence sports participation among students in grades 6 through 12 at Taylorville Community Unit School District number 3? And I chose this topic because I wanted to see firsthand um, I see this every day how technology is reshaping youth culture. I'm a coach and I've noticed, how my athletes are becoming increasingly influenced by what they see online, whether it's a highlight reel to a viral challenge, to an influencer possibly giving, peer advice or giving advice and to all the way to peer validation. Um, Social media can, as everyone knows, it's just like any other tool. It has the power to build, but when used incorrectly, it also can create a lot of damage. So, social media can build connection and motivation, but it can also trigger anxiety, self doubt, and disengagement. And so, to investigate this issue, I used a mixed methods approach and I combined quantitative surveys along with qualitative interviews with students to explore both the data and the deeper narrative behind their own experiences. In chapter two of my thesis, the literature reviewed a pretty, not shockingly critical truth, and that is social media is a double-edged sword when it comes to youth sports. And I drew upon three theoretical frameworks. Number one, the social cognitive theory by Bandera, which explains how young people learn behaviors by observing others, including online influencers and peers. Number two is the uses and gratifications theory, which examines how individuals use media to fulfill specific needs, such as belonging, achievement, or identity expression. And then the third theoretical framework was the self determination theory. This breaks down motivation into autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And these three factors, social media, it can either support or disrupt in terms of its impact. So um, the literature also highlights some other themes in chapter two that talks about screen time displacement, self comparison, digital motivation, and performance anxiety. I think those are all areas of which that are have a little bit of an impact here in terms of whether or not social media is a tool or if it's a disruptor. And I found that while social media it can offer it has plenty of spaces for inspiration and learning, it can also create some unrealistic standards, and you're going to see that in some of the interviews from the qualitative, data. It has the power to discourage sport participation altogether, and that's not what we want. So, in chapter 3, I talk about my methods of which I conducted my study. Uh, in we used a Google I used a Google form survey that was completed by 41 students in grades 6 through 12. And out of those 41 students, I also conducted 8 in-depth qualitative student interviews. And I think it's worth noting that I did experience a little bit of a delay in my IRB application due to my application getting lost or misplaced. And so the goal was to try to do some of the research at the end of the 2024-2025 school year, but it actually took place during the summer of 2025. Worked out fine, everything, but there was a time when I was a little bit panicked. But the survey included multiple choice and open-ended questions about things such as time spent on social media, amount of hours per day, their platform preferences, platforms such as TikTok and Snapchat and YouTube. It also had questions about their athletic involvement and their perceived impact of social media on their motivation, their identity, and their self-image. And when you coupled the surveys along with the qualitative interviews, which I wanted the interviews to give students a chance to share more of their personal reflections and their relationships with social media as it pertains to sport participation. And both when we couple when I believe when we coupled both of those approaches together, it really provided a large, in-depth kind of view of the data, and it is something I believe was essential to capturing the complexity of this topic. And in chapter 4, in findings and discussions, the quantitative highlights were pretty substantial, and I will mention 6. But over the first one, over 60% of the students reported using social media more than 3+ hours per day. 3+ hours is a lot, I believe. And the most popular platforms were TikTok, Snapchat, and YouTube. Both what I consider very video heavy social media, platforms. You know, things like X and Facebook to a certain regard are more text oriented. The video ones really were popping out in terms of like, the popular ones. Over nearly 3/4 or 70, nearly approximately 75% of the students that took place in this, took part of the survey, that they were already participating in sports. So you're getting a good visual or a good representation of students who are in sport. What are their driving motivations? How is it impacting their sport participation? Did it in fact make them not participate in another sport? So on and so forth. So another one, nearly half of the respondents said that social media influenced their decision to start, stop, or continue playing sports. I thought that was pretty significant, as well as nearly half, over 50%, actually indicated that social media has impacted how they feel about their bodies or their performance. So you can clearly see that social media has an impact in terms of how they're viewing themselves, how they're looking at their own participation in things. So that significant correlation, was found between high engagement with sports content and motivation to remain active. So thought those were some pretty critical takeaways in terms of the survey. Conversely, students with excessive screen time, and excessive I defined as 4+ hours a day, so over that 3-hour threshold, they were less likely to be involved in sports, which kind of reflects that displacement theory hypothesis, as I mentioned before. Some of the takeaways in the qualitative interviews, peer validation and pressure. It's definitely clear through some of the answers Students often felt motivated to perform better when they saw teammates posting workouts or game highlights, that self comparison part, but also feared judgment and comparison. And that speaks volume to to me, identity and expression. And when you look at some of the qualitative findings, many students viewed social media as an extension of their athletic identity. They use it to showcase positive things like commitment, dedication, and community, but they also felt pressured to maintain that certain image. So again, that double-edged sword component. One of the things that becomes very, very evident in this is parental support. All participants reported strong parental support for sports involvement, and this proved to be a very stabilizing force. Helping them navigate online stress and sit and stay grounded, and platform specific impact. Students definitely using TikTok or Instagram for athletic inspiration often showed a little bit higher drive. I thought that was kind of a unique takeaway. But they also reported greater anxiety tied to perfectionism and external validation. So, um, the conclusions and recommendations that I kind of talk about in chapter 5. Number 1 is social media is a powerful but nuanced influence, and it can drive motivation, but it also fuels insecurity and withdrawal. The second kind of conclusion I came up with, from the research, was engagement with sports content online is linked to increased participation, but only when paired with internal confidence and external support. Again, and it leads me to my third conclusion is that parental involvement and school culture matter. They can mitigate negative influences and amplify positive ones. And I think that's a very, powerful message and theme, especially when I, look back at some of my courses that I took during this master's at Greenville University in coaching and leadership. Culture and leadership are paramount. And in this digital age, if those things, like parental involvement and the correct intentional culture, whether it's from coaches or teachers or just schools in general, it all has to kind of be kind of a scaffold, scaffold kind of like together working in unison to help make sure students are navigating this very complex nuanced age. And so the recommendations, like for teachers and coaches, if you're if you're not talking about digital literacy, or if you're not implementing some type of curriculum that focuses on that, like things like social comparison, screen time balance, and positive body imagery, then you're probably missing the boat in terms of connecting and engaging with some of your student athletes, because that is what they are very acutely aware of. When it comes to parent and guardians, they need to engage in open conversations with their children about, their digital lives, and they also need to model very healthy online habits. When it comes to schools and policymakers, again, that piece of integrating mental awareness, media literacy, social emotional learning, but not just, in, the educational curriculum or PE and health programs, but also in the athletic programs. That is a new approach that, probably needs to be looked at. So, my closing reflections, this study has been an incredibly rewarding challenge. I've gained insight not only into how social media is affecting the next generation of athletes, but also into how we as adults, coaches, teachers, parents, how we can play a better role in helping students navigate that landscape. Greenville University has provided a platform where I could grow both academically and spiritually, and my faith has deepened through this process. And I'm thankful to God for sustaining me, especially through some of those hard days whenever some delays were happening. But I'm just very grateful, and to my family, my wife Carrie, our 4 daughters, Ellie, Emlyn, Eloise, and Eileen. I can't thank them enough for their love, their patience, and their belief in me. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank the student athletes who shared their voices and participated in this study. Um, you are the heartbeat of this study. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.